attendees. All right, good morning. Let's get started. Welcome to PNP Live. My name is Margaret and I'm the events coordinator in the Children and Teens Department of Politics and Prose. Thank you for joining us today for our event with Andrea Beaty to celebrate the publication of not one, but two new books, Sofia Valdez and the Vanishing Vote, and One Girl. She'll be joined in conversation by Karen McPherson, the Children and Teens Services Library Coordinator at Tacoma Park Library in Tacoma Park, Maryland. Politics and Prose's Children's Department has been delighted to partner with Karen and Tacoma Park Library over many years, and we're glad we are able to continue to do so in this virtual environment. Karen has served on the Caldecott and Siebert Award committees. She is a former reporter and currently writes special features and stories on authors and books for the Washington Post. Karen will introduce Andrea in a moment, but just a couple of announcements. Today we'll drop the book purchase link for both books into the chat during this conversation. You can order books today during the event or always from our store, either online or in person. Also today, you can ask a question of Andrea by clicking Q&A located at the bottom of your screen. You can also upvote on a question that you'd like to see answered. At the end of the conversation, we'll get to a few audience questions. As always, please remember this is a creative, safe space, and we ask that attendees be respectful of one another in any questions and comments. That's all the announcements I have. I'm going to now turn the program over to Andrea and Karen. Take it away.
Okay, well, I get the pleasure of introducing Andrea, which is wonderful. Andrea is the best-selling author of nearly 24 books. I didn't realize there were quite so many for kids, including favorites like Iggy Peck, Architect, and Rosie Revere, Engineer. She's also written books about young magicians, fluffy bunnies, and giants who come to play, which is a wonderful thing. Andrea was one of 6 children and grew up in a very small town in Illinois. Reading apparently was a very main family activity, and she has said that there were more books in her house than in the entire rest of the town, which I think is just a wonderful thing, just wonderful. Andrea studied biology and computer science in college, and she worked as a technical writer before breaking into the children's book market. And I have to say that I'm certainly glad that she switched careers for sure. Well, these wonderful books she's written. Today, Andrea is going to talk about these two books that she's just published. One is a new book about Sofia Valdez. We met her last year in Sofia Valdez, Future Press. The new book is called Sofia Valdez and the Vanishing Vote. Very timely, wonderfully written book with lots of great information and a fun story. And then she's also going to talk about One Girl, which is about how one spark of light can brighten the entire world. So I'm going to hand it over now to Andrea to start the show. Thank you, Andrea.
Oh, thank you. Hello, friends. I am so excited to be back in the Washington area, or perhaps all around the country even. I love coming to Politics and Prose, so thank you for having me back, even if I'm only a little face on a box now. And also, thank you, Karen. Last year I came to your library and had such marvelous time. So I'm delighted to see some old friends again. So today I want to introduce you to some new books. The first one I'm going to talk about a little is called One Girl. And this is a very lyrical poem, really, about the power of a book to bring light into the world of a girl, and then how that light and knowledge spreads throughout her family, her village, her country, and beyond. And it's very, the art is very fine and refined. It's illustrated by a wonderful artist named Dow Phumiruk, and we're going to watch a video, I think, from her in just a moment. I'm not going to read it to you because I think it's the kind of book that you really need to be up close to, and I don't think this format is going to really do it justice, and it's something I want you to really get the most out of when you read it. But I'll show you a few spreads that here is the girl sitting in the dark when all of a sudden this beautiful little spark comes by her, and she picks it up, and it's a book, and you can see that inside that book there starts coming out not just light and not just words, but beautiful flowers, and soon, like, the things that she sees and starts to imagine with her book becomes a whole wide world for her to explore. It's just really glorious illustrations that show how really opening a book is like going into a whole world. And I wrote this book because I watched a wonderful movie a few years ago called Girl Rising, and you can find it online. It's really important, and it informed me about the need for education for girls around the planet. And I think a lot of folks here in America and elsewhere around the world have really had their education disrupted so much by COVID that maybe it kind of gives us a wider sense of how important being able to go to school every day and to engage with your friends and your teachers and the things you learn, how really important that is. But for over 150 million girls around the planet, and also boys, but very largely girls, they don't have access to education at all. And that can be because maybe they're too poor, or they live too far away in a very remote place, or maybe there's violence or war in their area that keeps them from being able to travel to go to school. But in this story, the girl does get to go to school through the knowledge in that book. And just this, I'll show you my very favorite illustration. It's this one, when finally she really comes into her own, and not only does she, I guess, she able to read, but now she's able to start writing. And when you can start writing, you can start sharing your heart and your knowledge and your hopes and your dreams with everyone else. So I really, truly love this book. It's a very short read, but it's also a very strong personal connection to it. So I think we should watch the video from Dow if we can get that to work. And she'll tell you a little bit about her process and how she created these wonderful illustrations.
Hi, my name is Dow Phumiruk. I'm the illustrator of One Girl, written by the fabulous Andrea Beaty. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about how I created the art for One Girl. So I will draw digitally on the computer. I have a Wacom tablet, which is this thing here. It's upside down, but you can see what it looks like. It's pretty beat up. I've had it since 2011, and it has buttons on the side that I can program. I can make the buttons be my brush button, my erase button, my favorite button. I can zoom in and I can do all sorts of different things with the shortcut buttons. And I use the pen, the digital pen, to draw directly on this tablet. And then I watch the art on my screen on a program called Photoshop. So that's how I usually draw art for picture books. Sometimes I will draw just the preliminary sketches and composition on the computer, and that way I can say, okay, I want this character to be this size right here, and I want this one to be over here. This is where the background's going to be and what it's going to look like. And after I sketch it like that, I print it, and then I draw on it with pencil. That's what I did for One Girl. And here are some samples of the pencil art. The sketches I do don't always end up looking like the final art. For example, this one didn't end up in the final book, but these other ones did. And you'll see that they're not that pretty or polished. There's no color. There might be a little color like in this one, but basically they're pretty rough, and I use them kind of as a base for when I put them back into Photoshop, and I can keep some of the pencil texture in the final art. So after the sketches are done in pencil, I put them back in the computer, and then I open them up in Photoshop again, and this is where the fun and magic begins. I get to color them and add textures, and this makes the art come to life. I love to add fun colors to make it vibrant and intriguing, some lighting that'll make for some great ambiance in my art, so you can be transported to another world. In this book, I really had a great time being transported myself to another world while I drew, a world where there were giant books and giant pencils, buildings made out of books, platforms made out of books, and all sorts of powerful women that were role models for me. This project was one of my favorites just because I could use so much of my imagination. Lastly, I thought I would show you an image of a girl that I drew with pencil and how I transform it into a digitally colored and almost final piece. So as you can see, it was a pretty rough doodle basically. And I used the warp tool a lot, where I grab parts of the picture and I can rotate it or stretch it and make it shape the way I want to. So for example, the little girl is very young in the beginning and I elongated her to make her older and taller. And then I start adding color just like I would for the images in One Girl. And so this might be a character from One Girl who's a little younger, I think. At the end, I work on the details of her face and make sure that her eyes are pointing in the right direction. And then I love adding the magical aspects of the art, which is the glow and swirlies and stars and all those other details near the end. And at this point, I realized, you know what? I think I want it to be a square image. So I made her smaller and I added more blue background on the left side there. In creating the art for a picture book for publication, I usually take at least a week per spread. This one took only about 45 minutes for a small image and is not perfect. As you can imagine, creating art for an entire picture book takes a long time. It takes about 2 months for me to create the picture book mock-up or dummy, and then another 4 to 5 months to complete final art. Thanks so much for listening today. I hope you enjoy our book very much, just as much as I do.
I enjoyed watching that so much because it's fascinating to me to watch an illustrator's process and also the tools she uses. She uses a lot of digital tools, but they also start from a pencil sketch. And I think it's fascinating because no matter what kind of tools you make, when you make your own art, it's really the most important part is about pouring your heart into it and your imagination and just imagining like anything you can and putting it into art. So I'm so pleased to get to see that. I want to talk to you now a little bit about the other book that came out this week, and it's called Sofia Valdez and the Vanishing Vote. It is fiction. Yay. It began with this book, Sofia Valdez, Future Prez, which came out last year. And Sophia is a kid who is very brave, and that's in Sofia Valdez and the Future Prez. Sophia recognizes that there's an issue in her town that needs to be fixed. There's a giant trash heap, and she wants to turn that into a park. But she kind of has to end up trying to do it herself, and that's very scary. But she learns that she can make a big change even by herself, and that when she started and tried to make this change, other people noticed. And when they noticed, pretty soon they were joining in. And suddenly Sophia wasn't alone anymore. She was making a change. And that's the truth for anyone. You can, anytime you start with kindness and you take a step to do a good thing through kindness, other people notice. Not everybody, but other people notice. And sooner or later, someone else will come and join you, and then more people and more people. And that's how change happens with each person. So I wanted to explore more about Sophia because I fell in love with her in that book, I'll tell you. And I'm reaching over to grab, avalanche. I have an avalanche of books going on here. The new chapter book is part of a series. This is the 4th book, actually. And in the spring, this book, Iggy Peck and the Mysterious Mansion, came out. And in each of the chapter books, all of the kids from the questionnaire books show up, but usually one kid sort of leads the adventure. And this time I wanted to learn more about Sophia and see what we could see about her, and also have the other kids get involved. So here's what happens. I'm going to read you just a little bit. It starts in the school, and here's Miss Lila Greer, the teacher in Blue River Creek of grade 2. We've met her before. "Good morning," she said. Miss Greer said, "As you know, I have a surprise announcement for you." Miss Greer silently waited for all her students to look at her. That was how she got their attention without a lot of fuss. It worked. Within seconds, everyone was sitting quietly with their mouths closed and their eyes open. "Thank you, class," she said. "As you know, second grade is a time for new experiences and responsibilities." She paused and looked at the students seriously. "I believe that you are ready for a very big responsibility." "Like a chore?" someone asked. "Yes," said Miss Greer, "but a good one. I think we should get a class pet." The class cheered. "We will raise money to buy the pet and feed it. Everyone will take turns caring for the pet. So it will be a big responsibility," she said. "What kind should we get?" Immediately, the class erupted with ideas. "A pony, a buffalo, a giraffe." "Oh," Miss Greer said. Well, a boa constrictor, a hot dog, a giant squid." "A giant one?" Miss Greer asked. She looked worried. "A killer shark." Miss Greer looked a little dizzy and started to sway. The last time she looked like that, she was on a field trip and fainted on an island. "Are you okay, Miss Greer?" asked Iggy. "Oh dear," said Miss Greer, imagining giant squids and killer sharks eating hot dogs in her classroom. Oh goodness, Miss Greer is like, killer squids and giant sharks. "We could get a small one," said Rosie. "A small shark?" asked Miss Greer. "No," said Rosie, "a small pet." Miss Greer perked up. "That's a good idea," she said, pointing to a low bookcase by the window. "The pet's home will be on top of that bookcase, so no giant squids." "Ah, rats," someone said in the back of the room. "Rats?" said Miss Greer with her eyes wide open. "Oh, double dear, no rats." "A yeti?" "It has to be small," said Miss Greer. "A small yeti?" "Oh, triple dear," said Miss Greer, plopping into her seat. "I thought this would be easy. Maybe we're not ready for a pet." "We can do it," said Rosie. "But everyone wants something different," said Miss Greer. "How could we possibly pick one?" Sofia Valdez jumped to her feet. "I know," she cried. "We could have an election." And so they set out to have an election. And every kid has to go home and come back with a poster for their nominee for to be class pet. And everyone comes back with something different. And there are killer sharks. Iggy Peck wants the Chrysler building. Rosie wants a bird. Ada wants a turtle. And there are all kinds of other things. There's monkeys and fish and a skunk that's tooting a little bit stinky. All kinds of choices. But it's too many choices. So they have a primary, just like we've had to pick 2 candidates for a certain election that we have going right now. But that's what they did to come down to the bottom 2 candidates. And in the end, it becomes the bird or the turtle. And so teams are formed, candidates get their campaign groups together, everybody takes a role, and Sophia is going to be the election commissioner to run the election. And they go home, everyone's to come back and make posters and start spreading the news and all the things they know about turtles and birds, and it immediately goes off the rails. And here are some of the signs that the kids come back with, and I'll read some of them to you. Turtles are so boring. Birds don't love you. They just fly away. Birds. Turtles, what are they doing in those shells? What are they trying to hide? Don't get pooped on by a bird. Vote turtle. It's pretty rough. It's pretty rough. A lot like, a bit like the news. Anyway, so that's not going to work. No one's getting any information. And so they have to get better informed. And in the book, they will go and they'll meet both their school librarian and the city librarian who can help them, because as we know, librarians are very smart and they know how to find stuff. And it gets very exciting. They have an election, they count the votes, and it's a tie because one vote is missing. A vote has vanished. Dun, dun, dun. What will happen? What does it mean? It's a mystery. And I won't tell you what happens. You'll have to read the book. It's a great fun. I had such a good time writing it. And David Roberts, who lives in England, had such a great time doing the illustrations. And we include in the back some information about elections and some poetry, some history, and some things about the free press and about journalism and why it's important and how it works, and just all kinds of fun stuff. Anything that kind of, was connected or even not connected, but interesting, we tossed in there. So I hope you enjoy it. It's fun. I think it's my favorite one of the series, but I've said that every time a book came out, so I may not be the best source. Read them all, then you'll know. That's it.
Thank you, Andrea. That was a wonderful reading, and just great. You really bring the book alive. It is a wonderful book, and it's very timely because we are doing a big election in our country. And
I heard about that. Yeah.
Yes. Were you? Was it written with that in mind, or was this something that you started a while ago, or how did you come up to write?
It really was written with this in mind. Usually that's not the case, but it's been very hard to, every day has been major news events for the last many years, and that's always the case. But I think there's so much misinformation about how elections work, and I wanted kids to kind of understand just the fundamentals of it, without being preachy and annoying and boring and all that. So sure, it did, like our current events, definitely helped inform just the kinds of things that are important that I wanted to discover. And also pets are funny,
Yeah, wow, absolutely. Well, and the thing is that you have the fun story, and then there's a lot of information backing it up at the end, but kids could just read the fun story. It's really great, really.
Yeah, I promise it doesn't bog down too much with all the, it's not like a,
no.
Not to use.
I read it. It doesn't. I have a question. We heard from Dow, and you mentioned David Roberts, who is the illustrator of the Questioneer books and all the books, the picture books that you do about Iggy Peck and Rosie Revere. And you also have worked with Caldecott medalist Dan Santat. You've been very lucky in your illustrators. Dow's illustrations for One Girl are gorgeous. Can you, I'm not sure everybody knows how that process works. People think you get to pick the illustrator and all that. Can you tell us a little bit about how all that works?
Yeah, so usually it works that because I don't illustrate my own work, I love to draw, but my art is not the kind of art that would tell a story. Illustration is really its own special kind of thing. So I write a story and I send it to my editor, and the editor thinks about the story and thinks about the voice that they hear in the story and how the language is used. And then they work with the art director. And together they know a lot of artists, and they're always collecting art samples from artists, so they can have, they really have this enormous pool of talent to think about. And they try to match them up, and they think, what if this story, how would this artist go about creating illustrations? What that might that look like? Would they take it in what kind of direction? And so they pick the artist usually. And so that's what happened with David Roberts a million years ago. And I have to say it was one of the most marvelous things ever, because when David drew that picture just from the words in Iggy Peck, I never put in notes that say, there should be a boy and his hair should go like this and he should have a black and white sweater, because that's not my place, but also that would keep David from being able to go and just explore his complete imagination. Just like Dow was saying in the video, the best part for her is just imagining everything and then creating what she can imagine. And I don't want to get in the way of that. That would be rude, but also it would not be helpful. So they're talented people. So Iggy Peck kind of brought about David drawing this whole classroom of kids. And so the Questioneer books, and each of those kids has its own personality. And David Roberts now, he doesn't tell me anything about those kids, but there's little clues in there about sort of what they're like. And so that's become sort of the cycle where I study his illustrations. In fact, back on my wall, you can see I have all of the group pictures from the books. And I just look at those every day and think, well, who are you? And who are you? And who are you? And those kids sort of reveal a bit of their personalities from the art. And then I create a story for them and send that to David, and then he creates more art. So we have this sort of cycle. Now, I will say I was more involved in Dow becoming the illustrator because I had seen her work on Twitter. And I really loved the lines of her illustrations. They're very simple, but also they have so much heart in them, and I really like that. So I asked the editor and art director, said, have you seen this artist? And they liked her, so they liked her work. So that's how it happened.
Oh, that's great. Oh, that's wonderful. This is sort of a connected question. Book titles are very important because it gets your eye on the book and all that. I love Sofia Valdez and the Vanishing Vote. It's just perfect. And One Girl is also a sort of catches your attention. Tell us about titles. Do you get to pick titles or what?
Usually the title just kind of comes out at the same time as the book. It just sort of takes on, it becomes obvious what the title will be through the book, but sometimes it does change. So for instance, in the second, the Attack of the Fluffy Bunny books, the second one, the editor changed the title and it became The Schnoz of Doom, which was hilarious. So, you know, I work always with very talented people, and I'm always open to anything that's going to make the books better and stronger and funnier, or, you know, more personal, or connect with the readers better. So, but usually, and in this case with the Questioneers, that's become sort of the thing where it's the kid's name and it rhymes with the job. And I will tell you, that's getting hard.
Yeah, I bet. Exactly.
There are days when I think I should have homeschooled Iggy and then I wouldn't have this problem. But perfect, great problem to have.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true.
Very high quality.
A lot of wonderful books, which is terrific. So that's great. Well, I always like to ask children's authors how you got into it, because you were a technical writer and with a science background. I mean, how did this happen that you're now writing books?
You know, so I have a degree in biology and also in computer science, and I ended up working for a computer science company doing support, where I was the person on the phone going, did you turn it off and on again? And so I did that for a long time, and then got to start a newsletter and then do technical writing, which on one hand was the most boring thing in the universe, but on the other hand, it was actually fantastic training. I did not know I wanted to be a writer, but I've always, you know, books were always really important to me, and I wanted to write well even for this newsletter. So I studied editing and how to be like a really severe editor of getting anything out that you don't need and only saying what you need to say and saying it in an interesting way. Well, ends up that a few years later, when I was at home having had kids and I was reading lots of picture books and starting to get ideas and just really enjoying this art form that had changed so much from when I was a kid. But when I started writing, I realized that's exactly what you have to do in a kid's story, because kids are busy. They don't have time for books they don't like. There's too many good ones out there, and no one's going, you know, it's like you have to be interesting, you have to tell a good story, and you have to say it in as few words as possible. And so that's kind of where the technical writing was sort of like, it was a bit like working out so you could go play tennis. You know, you're doing the sit-ups so you have good muscles. This part is boring, but that part's fun.
That's great. That's great. And can you just one more, and then we're going to go to audience questions. How you know, do you have a writing schedule? Do you just sit down every day and write, or does it just come at certain moments, or what?
I wish I was more disciplined and did have. I found now, like with COVID, and I'm not traveling so much, or at all even, so that has put me more into a rhythm of getting up. I usually get up, have coffee, lots of coffee, lots of coffee. This is just the first one. And then I'll go through emails and I'll think, take care of sort of businessy things that I need to do. And then I will try to sit and write for an hour, 2 hours or more. It very much depends on what part of the process I'm in, though. When a book is just coming to me, then I find the best thing I can do is just go and take a lot of walks or go work in the garden and do something where my brain's freed up to just think about stuff. And then I'll keep a notebook nearby. And then especially when I'm gardening, it ends up being a very smudgy, dirt-covered notebook, but with words that hopefully mean something later. I'll even keep sometimes a notebook by my bed, and I'll wake up and I will write things which I am sure are brilliant, but I can never read.
Oh, well.
But I feel good having written them down.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Gosh. Well, Andrea, I think we'll go to questions from the audience, if that's okay. Great. There's a question from Lena, which is, do your characters have any personal connections with you?
Oh, that's very interesting. That's very interesting, but it's doubly interesting because your name is Lena and my grandmother's name was Lena. So I feel a personal connection to you. Hello, Lena. I don't meet a lot of Lenas and I love that name. So do they have a personal connection to me? Sometimes, like I never have made a character who was a copycat of someone I actually know. But every character has a little bit of this person and a little bit of that person and just traits of people that I know and love, or so they kind of end up being in there, or things from myself. But I've never done a copycat of an actual person that I know. I'm not sure why. I haven't. Even with the names, I tend to not use names directly of somebody. I may use a last name as sort of tucked in, but you'll only see it in the book once, and then you refer to them as the first person and such. So yeah, it's a good question.
It's a good question. Yeah. And we have questions from Maddie and Kate. The one they've asked, how do you come up with the names of your characters? And they also want to know how many books you've written.
Wow. So I'll answer the second one first. So I think that Sofia Valdez and the Vanishing Vote is number 22. It's my 22nd book to be published. So, and I have a lot of other stories that are in a drawer that probably will never get published, but that's okay. I wrote them and I enjoyed the process, and they may someday, but a lot of times I just write things because I need to get them out of my head and I try to think about things. So I've probably written a lot more books than that, but they're not published, but they may be. And how do I come up with the names? Well, it depends. So in the Questioneers series, they really depend on the character. So what I do is I look at those pictures behind me and I try to figure out who are those kids, and I try to follow the clues. So for instance, Ada Twist happened because in Iggy Peck Architect, when they're making the bridge, everybody's doing something. They're untying shoes, they're building stuff, and the girl in the polka dotted dress is standing at the side going like this. And I looked at her and I thought, that kid is sitting there thinking. She's asking questions. She's curious. And I thought, I bet she's a scientist, because a scientist is just someone who asks questions and looks for answers, right? And I thought, that kid's a scientist. So I thought, all right, I wanted to explore science and curiosity. So I thought about a lot of people who have been important through history in that regard. And so I thought about Ada Lovelace. And Ada Lovelace, and there's a lot of wonderful books. Politics and Prose says, I know a lot of wonderful books about Ada Lovelace. She's a person to know about. But she was the first computer probably what, 100 years before there was actually a computer to program. She was genius. So Ada's first name is Ada in honor of Ada Lovelace. And her middle name is Marie. And she's named after Marie Curie, who was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. In fact, she won 2 Nobel Prizes. And also this week, yay, 2 women won, I think was for physics, Nobel Prizes for physics. So,
Yeah.
so I wanted to pay respect to and to them. And that's where that name came from. And I always try to include in the back of the book some information. When I do that, I'll include some information. And Rosie Revere ended up being sort of, I wanted to pay tribute to the Rosie the Riveters, who were women during World War II, who helped make planes and tanks and jeeps and all of the things. And there's information at the back of that book. And that's great Aunt Rose as well. So.
That's great. Well, this follows into another question. This is from Eleanor about asking about the Iggy Peck book, about what it's about, but also where did you come up with the name for Iggy and Iggy Peck? So
Iggy Peck just sort of came to me. I have to say that was the first book, and I had no idea there would be other books or anything. And I liked the name Iggy, and I always have, and so he just became Iggy. And since these books are rhyming books, and particularly Iggy Peck has a very complicated rhyming scheme, that it's kind of a cheat, but I found it's very helpful to have a name that I can use in many forms. So Iggy Peck gets called Iggy, Iggy Peck, Ig, Young Ig, Ignatius, good gracious Ignatius, all the different forms. So because I'm in a rhyme, it's all about how many syllables you have in a line. So if I need one more syllable to make it sound right, because when you're reading a poem and it's like it's got the wrong number of syllables, it's like something's wrong with it and you can't figure out what. That's what's wrong with it. Yeah. So I kind of cheated and use his name in lots of different ways. So I always try to use a name that's slightly more complicated, so there can be some flexibility. And Ada is a very short name, but Ada Marie. Now I've got 3 syllables, Ada Marie Twist, now I got 4.
Great. Okay, that's wonderful. Right. We have another question from Margaret, who says, "My kids and I love your books." Thank you. We've noticed that the characters from the later books are actually in your earlier books, just in the illustrations. Did you know at the time that they would be the main character in future books? And you've talked a little bit about that, but maybe a little bit more.
No. So when I wrote Iggy, I really saw that as a one-off book because I was writing it about my son who loved to build things. And I thought, what if there was a kid who loved architecture? And all of my stories kind of come from a what if question that I then try to answer. And that's something you guys can do, kids, when you want to write something, to start asking yourself, well, what if questions, and then follow it. Well, if that happens, then what if this happens? That's what writing is. So I wrote Iggy, and then when David came back with that classroom of kids, I tried to write a sequel to Iggy, but I'd kind of written it already, and I tried for a couple of years, it just didn't work. And then started looking at those other kids in the classroom and realized that David really poured enormous personality into each one. And he, in fact, knows lots of stuff about them. But it's like we're parents. We're both co-parents. I know some things, he knows some things, but they're not always the same things. So I just started exploring them. So now they have just sort of evolved over time. And now it has really become this treasure hunt, where David sort of leaves clues about the personality. And then I say, well, I wonder if that means this. And then I go on it. But yes, I want to tell you this. And thank you, Margaret, for that question. So in the art, David puts a lot of secrets. He puts a lot of Easter eggs into the stories. So in the books, all of the kids will show up at least twice. So they'll be there in the classroom. But lots of other things happen as well. Lots of the objects from one book will end up just on the bookshelf in someone else's house, or they will find a way to be in the story. The biggest, easiest place to find things is in Sofia Valdez. When she climbs up, she and her grandpa get sort of taken up this large trash heap. All the trash in that heap comes from the other books. But there's other stuff too, like there's all kinds of jokes in Ada Twist in the illustrations and the notes she draws on the wall. And when you see there's a lot of equations, and when you see the equations AB, that's Andrea Beaty, DR is David Roberts, AT is Ada Twist, RR is Rosie Rivera, Eddie Peck. So there's all kinds of tiny hidden jokes. And in Ada Twist, the blocks spell out Ada Lovelace. But there's tons and tons of things. And I tell you, the illustrations look very simple, but it's really a testament to David that he puts so much detail, that there is never a detail that's by chance. There's always a reason. And when you go back and you look at things, you'll find them. And one last thing, it'll be a treasure hunt for you. Go through and look at the books and notice a pencil. Because in each book, as each kid has their own adventure, David gives them a pencil. So Iggy Peck at the end will have a pencil. Rosie has a pencil in her book. And then down the line, you'll see each kid with a pencil. So
That's
it is.
great.
And,
Wow.
and also for those of you who have Happy Birthday, Madame Chapeau, which is another book we did, but which is not part of the Questioneers, Iggy Peck's mom and dad show up in there. There are lots and lots of famous hats that David either designed himself or for famous people, that real existing hats. And you can learn about that stuff on my website at andreabeaty.com. I should give a shout out too, that our publisher has a wonderful website called Questioneers.com, which is questioner with 2 E's, Questioneers.com. And there are lots of posters you can download, these fantastic posters, activities, educator guides, all kinds of stuff out there. So go check it out.
Great. That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, we have time for just maybe another question or two. Terry has asked a couple questions and is obviously a fan of yours. His mom, the mom's name is Ada, which is nice. Terry asked if, about just, do you keep a book in your head basically when you're trying to write it? And maybe, I guess, how long does it stay in there?
Well, that really depends what else is going on. I'll tell you. I have learned that if I get an idea in my head, it is a good idea to write it down, because sometimes I will completely forget it. And then a few months later, I'll go, wait a minute, I had a good idea. I fear that there have been quite a few lost. But once I really get into a book, I will do, especially with the rhyme, if I'm trying to get a couple of lines to work, I will walk around, and I'm sure I look quite goofy because I will walk around going, I'm sure I look really weird, but I don't care because I'm figuring something out.
That's great. That's great. And one last question this is from Sylvie. Are you going to make books of the other classmates at Blue River Creek?
Well, this is what I say. There will be another one next fall. I can't tell you who it is yet, but I'm so excited about it. I'm so excited. And then that character will also have another chapter, have a chapter book and a project book. We have wonderful project books that I write that are along whatever the person's thing of interest. So there's one for architecture and engineering and science and activism. Sofia Valdez's project book for activists will come out, and it's beautiful. It's my favorite one yet. So yes, there will be. I don't know how many books there will be. They are getting harder and harder each time. But I will write them as long as they're interesting to me, as long as they're funny, as long as they're true. If I can tell a story that tells something true, I won't write them if they hit a spot where it's just, let's just make up a thing. Nobody needs that. Kids need great books. They don't need more books that are not good. So, but I do know we will continue for sure the chapter books as well, because I think like in this town of Blue River Creek, there's so much to explore. So, so yeah, I hope to. And I have other news that I wanted to share too. In the fall, there will be a TV show for Ada Twist scientists, and I'm absolutely over the moon about that. And next fall, I think Ada Twist's next chapter book will come out as well. So I'm very, very excited about that, and I'm doubly excited because the Higher Ground is the Obama's production team, and they are producers on the show. So I'm like,
Wonderful. Yeah, congrats on that. I was just gonna
Thank you.
ask about that. That's a wonderful thing to move your books over to the animated series. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a secret I had to sit on for a long time, and it was burning a hole in my pocket. So I'm glad they announced it. Whoosh.
All right. Wonderful. Well, Andrea, it's been a delight to talk with you, and I hope everyone has enjoyed it as much as I have. You have such enthusiasm for your work. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I want to thank Abrams and Politics and Prose, and thank you and your beautiful library, and all of you parents and kids out there today. Thank you, and be well, and enjoy the day, and read some books, and take care of each other, and be well.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Andrea, and thank you for a wonderful conversation. Thank you for joining us, all of you out there listening and watching, for joining us on PNP Live. I did put the chat in, I did put the book purchase link into the chat just a moment ago. So if you haven't had a chance yet to get the newest books, go ahead and do that, or you can always order online through Politics and Prose, or we are open, so you could come into any of our branches. It looks like Andrea has something else she wants to say, I think.
I do, and I feel remiss not saying this earlier. Yes, and this is just a comment to parents out there. Thank you, thank you, thank you for supporting indie booksellers. People say this a lot, but I'm not blowing smoke when I say these books exist because of indie booksellers like Politics and Prose, because indies got behind Iggy and showed that book love, and it was a quiet little book, and they helped find kids who loved it, and parents who loved it, who spread it to others, and that's why there's now chapter books, and now that's why there's going to be all these things. It's because of indies. So thank you, indies, and supporting them is vital. Without them, quiet little books just evaporate, and they're never heard from again. So you guys do a great job. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep reading. We'll say goodbye for today.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.